We like to believe we are the peak of progress. But what if batteries, complex computers, seismographs, and even nanotechnology existed long before the Industrial Revolution? What if we are not inventing the future, but slowly rediscovering a forgotten past? There's a quiet confidence in the modern world. We build machines that can think. We send signals across the planet in an instant. We hold more knowledge in our hands than entire ancient civilizations ever could. It feels like evolution. It feels like we've come further than anyone before us. But what if that feeling is wrong? Because buried deep beneath ancient ruins, sealed inside tombs, or hidden in places no one thought to question, are objects that shouldn't exist. Not for their time, not for their technology, and not for the story we've been told about human progress. At first, they seem harmless. Simple artifacts, curiosities, pieces of history. But the closer you look, the more unsettling they become. Because some of them don't look ancient at all. They look modern. Devices that resemble batteries. Mechanisms that calculate complex astronomical cycles. Materials engineered with a precision we only recently began to understand. And this is where things don't add up. Because history follows a pattern. Simple ideas come first, then improvement, then innovation, step by step. But these discoveries don't follow that pattern. They appear suddenly, fully formed, as if the knowledge behind them didn't evolve, but already existed. And this is what makes researchers uncomfortable, because real progress leaves evidence behind. Early versions, failed attempts, gradual improvement. But here, that evidence is missing. Instead, we find isolated pieces of advanced understanding appearing far too early in the timeline, and then disappearing completely, which leads to a question that doesn't have a simple answer. What if these weren't isolated discoveries? What if they were fragments of something much bigger? Because if even one of these objects represents true lost technology, then we are not the first advanced civilization. We are the latest. And that changes everything. Because it means progress isn't a straight line. It's a cycle. Rise, collapse, rediscovery, over and over again, each time losing something, each time forgetting more than it remembers. And maybe what we call modern invention isn't invention at all. Maybe it's memory. Faint, incomplete, but slowly returning. Because here's the part no one likes to think about. If ancient civilizations once understood things we are only now rediscovering, then something happened. Something powerful enough to erase knowledge itself, to break the chain of progress, to reset everything. And all that remains are fragments, scattered across the world, waiting to be found. And the first fragment is easy to miss. Small, simple, almost insignificant. A clay jar, hidden for centuries, unnoticed, until someone realized. It might be something far more than it seems. Because inside that jar could be the first sign that we are not the first to discover electricity. The first discovery doesn't look like technology. It looks ordinary. A small clay jar, a copper cylinder inside, an iron rod at the center. Nothing about it feels revolutionary. And yet it might be. Known today as the Baghdad Battery, this object was discovered near Baghdad and dates back over 2,000 years. At first, it was cataloged like any other artifact. But then someone asked a simple question. What happens if you fill it with liquid? When researchers recreated it and added a mild acid, like vinegar, the jar produced a small electric charge. Electricity, in the ancient world. But here's where it gets strange. There are no wires, no devices, no clear explanation for why anyone would build something like this. The official explanation suggests it may have been used for electroplating or possibly had a completely different, non-electrical purpose. And that's reasonable. But this is where things don't add up. Why design something capable of generating electricity without any known use for it? Some researchers believe it may have been accidental. Others suggest it was experimental, an early discovery that never fully developed. But if that's true, then how many discoveries were made and then lost? And this is where the mystery begins to grow. Because the next object isn't simple. It's impossibly complex. Pulled from the depths of a shipwreck off the coast of Greece, the Antikythera Mechanism was, at first, just a corroded lump of bronze. Until it was opened. Inside was something no one expected. Dozens of interlocking gears. Precision engineering. A system capable of tracking the movement of the sun, the moon, and even predicting eclipses. It's often called the world's first analog computer. But here's the problem. It dates back more than 2,000 years. and nothing like it appears again for over 1,000 years. This is where things don't add up. Technology doesn't just appear fully formed. It evolves. So where are the earlier versions? Where are the prototypes, the failed designs, the gradual improvements? The official explanation is that it was a unique invention, an isolated masterpiece of engineering that simply didn't survive. And that could be true. But this is what makes researchers uncomfortable, because the level of precision inside the mechanism suggests something more. Not a beginning, but a continuation. As if this device was part of a larger tradition, one we've completely lost. Because if this wasn't the first, then there were others, and they're gone. And then, the pattern becomes even harder to ignore. Because the third discovery doesn't calculate the stars. It listens to the Earth. In ancient China, during the 2nd century, an inventor named Zhang Heng created a device that could detect earthquakes. But not just detect them. It could determine. Modern analysis revealed that the glass contains tiny particles of gold and silver, dispersed at the nanoscale. Nanotechnology. In ancient Rome, the official explanation suggests this effect may have been accidental, a byproduct of ancient glassmaking techniques. And that's possible. But this is what makes researchers pause. Creating this effect requires precise control over particle size and distribution. Consistency. Understanding. So was it really an accident? Or was it knowledge applied deliberately and later forgotten? Because if ancient craftsmen understood materials at this level, then they weren't just artists. They were engineers. And then we go deeper. Because the next discovery isn't delicate. It's legendary. For centuries, Damascus steel has been surrounded by mystery. Blades forged from it were said to be sharper, stronger, and more resilient than anything else in the ancient world. They could slice through metal, hold their edge for years, and display flowing, wave-like patterns across their surface. But here's the part that unsettles modern science. When researchers examined surviving blades, they found structures resembling carbon nanotubes, a feature associated with modern nanotechnology. The official explanation suggests these structures formed naturally during the forging process. And that may be true, but this is where things don't add up. The exact method used to create Damascus steel has been lost. Completely. Even with modern tools and scientific understanding, recreating it perfectly remains incredibly difficult. So how did ancient blacksmiths achieve something we still struggle to replicate? Some researchers believe it was a unique combination of materials and techniques. Others suggest something more unsettling, that this knowledge wasn't discovered, it was inherited, passed down, and eventually lost. Because if ancient civilizations once mastered materials at this level, then what else did they know? And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Because the next discovery doesn't just challenge history, it challenges time itself. Hidden in a remote part of China, in the Qinghai region, researchers discovered something embedded in solid rock. Iron pipes, running through the stone, as if they had been placed there intentionally. At first, it seemed like a geological anomaly. But here's where it gets strange. Some estimates suggest these formations could be tens of thousands of years old, far older than any known ironworking civilization. The official explanation points to natural processes, mineral deposits forming pipe-like structures over time. And that's a valid possibility. But this is what makes researchers uncomfortable. Some of the pipes appear hollow, structured, organized in ways that don't feel random, as if they were placed there, not formed. Because if these structures are truly artificial, then they were created at a time when humanity wasn't supposed to have metalworking at all. And this is where everything starts to feel different. Because now we're not just looking at isolated inventions. We're looking at something that shouldn't exist anywhere in the timeline. Something that suggests knowledge far older than we can explain. And the final discoveries? They don't just suggest lost technology. They suggest something even more unsettling. That the past may have been far more advanced than we're ready to accept. The next discovery is small, almost unremarkable. A piece of polished crystal, no larger than a hand. But this is where things don't add up. Known as the Nimrud lens, it was discovered in the ruins of an ancient Assyrian city and dates back nearly 3,000 years. At first, it was labeled as a decorative object, possibly part of jewelry or an ornament. But then researchers looked closer. The curvature, the clarity, the way it bends light. It functions like a lens. And this is where it gets strange. If it was used as a lens, it could have magnified objects, or even been part of a primitive telescope. But here's the problem. There's no confirmed evidence that ancient Assyrians had optical devices of that kind. The official explanation suggests it may have been used for simple magnification or even just decoration. And that's reasonable. But this is what makes researchers hesitate. Because crafting a lens requires understanding how light behaves. Curvature, refraction, precision shaping. So why create something like this without fully developing the technology around it? Some believe it was an isolated experiment. Others suggest it may have been part of something larger, a fragment of lost optical knowledge. Because if ancient civilizations could manipulate light, then what else were they capable of seeing? And this is where the story reaches its most unsettling point. Because the final discovery isn't physical. It's written, preserved in ancient Sanskrit texts, passed down for thousands of years. Descriptions of flying machines, known as Vimanas. At first, they sound like mythology. Stories, symbols, imagination. But here's where things don't add up. Some passages describe these craft in striking detail. Metal structures, complex propulsion systems, even references to engines powered by mercury. And this is where things become difficult to ignore. Because the descriptions don't read like simple myths. They read mechanical, structured, as if someone was trying to describe technology using the language available to them. The official explanation is clear. These are symbolic stories, mythological interpretations of the gods. And that is a valid perspective. But this is what makes researchers uncomfortable. Because some of the descriptions feel too specific, too detailed, too technical, as if they are echoes of something real, distorted by time. Some believe these texts describe imagination. Others wonder if they preserve fragments of knowledge from a civilization that existed long before recorded history. Because if even part of it is true, then the implications are impossible to ignore. It would mean that advanced technology didn't begin with us. It ended and started again. And this is where everything connects. A battery without a system. A machine without a lineage. Materials we still struggle to understand. Structures that shouldn't exist. Pieces of a puzzle scattered across time. Individually, they can be explained. But together, they tell a different story. A story of knowledge that appears